think it's funny because when I first became a Christian, when I like to say I jumped the broom with Jesus back in 1983, got married to Jesus, and but my understanding of my faith from that point really until I'd say the last decade was really only grounded in my understanding of the cross. It's almost like the whole faith, in fact, the whole story of God was narrowed down to the 3 years Jesus walked on earth, and everything he said only led up to the cross, and nothing that came after it mattered, and nothing that came before it mattered. But I think that since then, what I've realized and what has created deep healing in my life has to recognize the fact that Jesus came in the midst of a larger story. Jesus entered into a story that had already been playing itself out for thousands of years. And the story has continued since him. And so when I look back at the creation story, particularly Genesis 1 through 12, I see the story of how God created all things very good. In the text, it actually literally says violently good. It was that good. It was violently good. And that's not just all things. It was all the relationships that God created in the beginning were very good. The relationship between self with self, the relationship between humanity and God was very good. Humanity and the rest of creation, humanity and the systems that governed us, and us and life itself, and ethnic groups and families, they were all good. So I think that what we saw was with the fall, we saw us taking our own peace at the expense of the peace of all, in the taking of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And as we did that, all the relationships that God declared very good, only a chapter and a verse before that, they all fell down. So now how do I see my life intersecting with that? I mean, I see the choices that I made, and I have made regarding, and how shame has actually played into those choices. You know, funny illustration of that is how back probably in high school, you know, I moved from Philadelphia to Cape May, New Jersey, and in Philadelphia was an all-black city. We didn't have bangs. We didn't know what bangs were, you know, like the hair bangs. But when I moved to Cape May, New Jersey, which was all white, I cut bangs, I straightened my hair, I tried to assimilate as much as I possibly could, because that's what it looked like for me to have peace, right? But really what it was covering over what I thought of as my shame, which was my hair. I covered over my shame with chemicals. And God released me from that shame probably when I was in my mid-30s, and I had this really deep prayer experience where God came to me in prayer in the midst of a community that was praying around me and said, "Agree with me that I've made you well." And I couldn't. And that's when I realized I have a problem. I'm not agreeing with God about something God is saying is true. And so I had this experience where God said, "Agree with me that I've made you well." I wrestled with God, and eventually God showed me, yes, He has made me well, and I agreed with Him. The next day, someone I never saw after that and I never saw before that came up to me and said, "God wants you to stop being chemically dependent." And I said, "What are you talking about? I'm not on drugs." And she said, "Well, no, it's your hair. He wants you to stop straightening your hair." And I freaked out. I was like, no, because that got personal. That got personal. A couple months later, I stopped straightening my hair, stopped relaxing it, as we call it in the Black community, and I went natural, is what we call it, and I have not gone back since then. And I discovered, and I love my hair now, I do. But more than that, see, it started there, but it didn't end there. So how my story of redemption has really worked itself out has been starting with myself and then moving its way out into my family, and becoming an agent of redemption within my family, and having God work shalom in me with regard to brokenness that happened in my life at the hands of family members. And then out from there into my community and becoming an agent of shalom in my community, calling different aspects or sections of the community to come together in order to work for the shalom of the city. And for us, what that looks like is working to make sure that toxic agents that are being dumped into African American and Latino neighborhoods are no longer dumped there by policy. that's banned from being dumped in those neighborhoods, or that healthy food has a chance to get into those neighborhoods to cut the rates of diabetes and obesity and heart disease. Or to make sure that the city of New York shores up its relationship between the police and the community to create safer communities where businesses can move in and people can be lifted out of poverty. Or in the issue of immigration reform. So making sure that the image of God, basically, is protected in all people, including myself, but not only myself, also in my neighbor. That's how I've really seen the gospel at work in me and through me in this world.